Hi, everybody. My name's Dr. Kieran Johnson. This is a presentation that I gave at the Third International Summit on Gravitation, Astrophysics, and Cosmology when I headed to Spain just a week or so ago. Obviously, a couple of weeks now. So I was talking about the He-BEC isotropic singularity, and this is a Helium Bose Einstein Condensate as a model for what the universe looked like at the beginning of time and how I've been modeling that using the ideas of biology and the imprint of cosmology left behind in our own biology, how to bring together the large cosmological side and the small subatomic physics side in a unification, building a biological system out of time and space. Um, Obviously, we're here learning how our biology works at subatomic resolution and its beautiful relationship in terms of cosmology. So it's a theoretical model that allows the identification of dark energy and dark matter. Who am I? I'm a regenerative medicine scientist, a quantum biologist, and a CEO and owner of quantum technologies here in Wellington, New Zealand. And yeah, it's my pleasure to speak to you today on the He-BEC singularity model and a changing of tides, going from a hot Big Bang nuclear synthesis that the JWST has shown to be no longer compos mentis in terms of the information that the JWST has provided in terms of the age of the galaxies being formed at the very fringe, at the very edge of the universe, being young, not old. And the He-BEC model provides context for that as a dark energy halo expansion is linked to a compressed dark matter gravitational system. So really kind of going from hot to cold and from Big Bang to alpha particle emission. So let me get started with the presentation, if it's going to allow me to do that. Okay. So the supposed age of the universe, 13.82 billion years, the idea of a singularity being small, the first light generation at 380,000 years. Really, there's a chronological process that's led to the composition of the universe in terms of dark energy and dark matter. Looking at the cosmic microwave background information, the wavelength around 1.6 e to the negative 3 meters, 1.6 millimeter, and the Planck distance of 1.6 e to the negative 35 of a meter, delta of 1 e to the 32. So we have a square root system connected to gamma rays around 1 e to the 16 associated with the gluon quark atomic system. And we can see that matter antimatter annihilation can give rise to that kind of functionality. So when you're exploring the universe from the time perspective, you need a clock system. And what biology has is an atomic clock system operating within it. And I've really been utilizing that, which you'll see later on in this presentation, as a way of modeling functionality in the time side of the universe rather than the space side of the universe, linked to biology and how biology unites subatomic and cosmological processes. So I do not prescribe to Big Bang hot nuclear synthesis. I believe that there's a better model called an alpha particle emission. That process generates dark energy, dark matter that predates matter formation. And that there's a series of steps and changes that takes place that takes dark energy and dark matter and converts it into particle form where you have mass and charge. through tunneling and entanglement. And it's those processes that give rise to the proton. And the proton system in biology has many imprints on it in terms of its functionality, in terms of its ability to quantum tunnel, and its role in biology and pH regulation is something that can be used to explore and model the very functionality that the universe displays in its composition. So I've got this kind of model that we've been using for a long time, and we've got issues associated with it because of the horizon problem, because of the asymmetry associated with the baryons, a different level, different amounts, right, of matter and antimatter, where so-called matter has won the day, and we have an atomic system that then is um, useful to provide a way of seeing the 5% matter, but not understanding what the 95 dark matter, 95% of the universe not known. So what I'm going to do is kind of tell you a different story, a story that is related to biology and how biology works, and how that integrates cosmology and subatomic systems linked to dark energy and dark matter. So we got to start with the right laws. One of them is the conservation of energy. So energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only transformed. So in that, as a starting point, you have to say that everything was there at the beginning, but in a form that's unmeasurable, in a form that is uniform, and in a form that provides a way of giving the composition that we have today in terms of dark energy, dark matter, and matter, if you prescribe to that as a flavor of the universe that you perceive. So my approach, I constrain my model via energy conservation. So I have a singularity that is large, that has one wavelength associated with its internal structure, so it's homogeneous. And because it doesn't have any contrast in terms of energetics, it only has the ground state energy of a Bose Einstein condensate, that structuring provides context for why it's unable to be measured, because if you put energy into a condensate, that condensate changes its structure to reflect the energy that you've put into it. And that means that measurement always produces an artifact or a change to the initial state. And if you don't know what the initial state is, then you do not understand why the energy you've used to create the change is resulting in the observation that you're making. And that's a grounded out in the paradox, right, of quantum mechanics and the observer effect. So what we see in biology is that there is a quantum fluid system operating as well, in a compressed environment of protons giving rise to superfluids. So the modeling of biology and consciousness linked to superfluid behavior and its quantum coherence and the generation of atomic instability and atomic theory all play a part biologically, which allows one to then model the cosmological processes that gave rise to biology as an early system in our own evolution. And that's really the modeling that I've been doing with proton tunneling systems connected to neurotransmitter function. And we'll see that in a little moment. So Max Planck, the UV catastrophe and the introduction of the Planck length, really helpful in order to understand that there's an internal reference point through which every atom is, in its own frame of reference, able to refer to uh, at the Planck distance. So having a frame of reference and having a clock timing associated with that is incredibly important in the isotope decay timing processes connected to the biological system involved in memory formation and memory recall. Okay, so mini black hole at the center of every proton. Yeah, Nassim, I totally agree with you. And looking at the functionality of Planck singularities within a atomic structure is critical to act as a reference point internally. So, we know the speed of light in a vacuum. There's this electromagnetic spectrum. We've got redshift, blue shift. We've got functionality of cosmic inflation in terms of expansionary space processes and the formation of light at 380,000 years after the beginning of time. So using light to look back further than that point is pointless. There is no light. And therefore, how do you perceive what's going on? Well, if you look at the number of seconds in that 380,000 years, 1.1991888 e to the plus 13 seconds, this is a connection to a biological process as well, associated with the aromatic ring, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But you can see the 888 e to the 13 seconds and the 888 neutron decay system. You could say, well, there's a 1 e to the 6 delta difference between the two, and that links the role and functionality of the electric field decay energy of the charm quark. And when exploring the ideas of matter-antimatter asymmetry, you can see that the decay of the neutron, free neutron at 888 seconds versus the proton at 1 e to the plus 35 years, which is like e to the 42 seconds, there's a big difference between them. And that difference correlates to a compositional shift from antimatter to matter. And when you're exploring the new He-BEC singularity model, supersymmetry inversion, and the revision of quark charge calculations, what you get really is a way of looking at the temporal side of reality from the perspective of each individual particle's half-life timing and its location and its geometric form within space and time associated with a kilojoule per mole meter per second system. So the model that's been developed allows quantum gravity calculations to be performed on the basis of the rest mass of the various particles of the standard model, converting those into geometric forms and two different timings and two different locations, essentially unpicking the structural features of subatomics and their relationships to the other particle systems that are surrounding them in the biological system. So how to structure space and time in terms of the features of the biological structure of molecules. And it's a very kind of perplexing model because what we're doing is really taking the Planck distance to be true and real at the current moment of time rather than at the beginning of time. And the reason for that is the initial distance that we see in the He-BEC singularity model, and that's that wavelength that's been identified correlated to Planck time and gravitational implosion. So the He-BEC model, overcomes a lot of the issues that we've currently got in the standard approach in the hot Big Bang nuclear synthesis. So we can find a uniformity associated with a large structure if it's a Bose Einstein condensate singularity. We can identify antimatter in atomic theory associated with positrons linked to neutrons. We can explain a model that has dark energy at 68%, dark matter at 27%, and matter at 5%, based on alpha particle emission timings and the half-life of 1 e to the 18 seconds. Yeah, you can get vacuum energy calculations, 3 generations of particles associated with fight, flight, freeze responses in a biological system that's connected to a metronome of time, nanometers per second, correlated to 2 times elementary charge, which is a positron-electron timing system of our biology connected to the vacuum space. So why time is directional? Yeah, we can see that functionality, that consciousness is slow in comparison to the unconscious physics timing of half-lives. And the functional role of the aromatic ring in biology is a gatekeeper to atomic starlight energy within. So it's a little bit weird to think that the aromatic ring with its radius of 1.39 e to the negative 10 meters is correlated to 1.39 e to the plus 10 years. But hey, them's the breaks in a sense. And when you break the aromatic ring open, you get to witness the energetic release. And there's some functionality associated that with healing and regeneration in biology. So this is nighttime biochemistry and the release of light energy for healing and regeneration. So the standard atomic theory biologists have been using for a long time, electrons, protons, and neutrons, and we've ignored the presence of positrons. So the antimatter missing in cosmology is actually hidden in the biological system. And it's involved in the generation of the new body in terms of stored energy within the aromatic ring that gives rise to healing and regeneration. So biological living systems, store antimatter, and we use that antimatter matter annihilation process to give us energy for healing and regeneration within our bodies. And that might sound a little bit crazy, but I've actually got a very sound scientific framework that gives rise to that line of thinking, which is very different from the ideas that we've kind of learnt through making measurements in an external physical form, and then applying those ideas of 5% matter to a biological system, which is a coherent light system, not a physical system. So we really need to change the way we view the world in order to understand the world that we view being light, and light has no mass, no charge, and therefore is not physical. So if you can get your head around the ideas of non-physical vision within the mind, then we're on the same path. So positrons were identified in 1932, and predicted in 1928 by Paul Dirac. Right, so a positron and positron therapy is being used, right? So positrons are not something that's illusionary or made up. This is pretty much standard physics. Why isn't it being incorporated into the standard model for biology? That is a problem. Excuse me. I would say that, you know, including positrons means you have to revise quark charge calculations, and we've used measurement-based means to, with a Large Hadron Collider to identify the quark system, the 3 generations of quarks, and the models that we've developed have been based on interaction and disturbing structure, which then gives rise to a fundamental kind of perception of reality based on asymmetry. So if you think that's an artifact, and that biology is a low energy system, it's not a high energy system, and biology works through geometry, and the functionality of that creates a narrow window through which processes operate. So Dirac, 1928, 1932. It's almost, coming up to 100 years. And really, biology is not able to be explained using the ideas of stable atoms. Materialistic perspective, reductionistic models only take you so far. And that's really the problem that I find, is that the stable atom systems, the biochemistry of carbon, does not describe the element hydrogen and its functionality through proton tunneling and the modulation of pH. So to look at how the proton actually operates in biology, you have to look at things a little bit differently and see the symmetry operating within it in the electromagnetic system and understand how it can do the magic of proton tunneling. So I guess came to the conclusion after having a spiritual healing experience myself at church in 2013, and the experience of witnessing the radioactive decay of an atom, seeing the nucleus, experiencing, this energetic release based on stored trauma that had been inside me for 30 years. If people know my story, then they know the ideas that kind of come from that, the human retina inverted, they point inward, and we're seeing the light that the mind is generating, and it's generating light through this very process that I'm talking about, linked to the proton tunneling system. So I've developed a model where I've revised quark charge calculations to use whole numbers and multiplication rather than fractions and adding. And that shifts the perspective from the external physical to an internal electromagnetic system, and you can get to see the neutron being a -1 charged antimatter system connected to the positron. And the neutron plus the positron gives you an overall 0 charge, which is more aligned with the ideas of the standard model where the neutron has 0 charge. But in my model, I've got 2 extra particles per helium atom. So I've ended up with 16 parts rather than 14 parts if you add up the quarks and the electron and the quarks and the positron. And so the inner experience of breaking the aromatic ring and releasing the trauma from my childhood associated with my mum's suicide when I was 11 gave me a insight that, yeah, atomically there's actually a positron system that's outside a magnetic barrier. And you can't really measure it and can't really see it until you realize that you're storing this atomic energy for healing and regeneration within you, and that aromatic ring breaking gives rise to the vision that you have. And this is something that I've had to come to terms with. This is what happened. And the product that I was developing at the time was involved in breaking open aromatic rings using hydroxy radicals out of Manuka honey as photophentine chemistry. And you can look up that kind of chemistry and see that it does produce hydroxy radicals. And in the pollen germination system, it requires hydroxy radical energy to convert the phenolic compounds into CO2 and water to produce the pollen tube, give it the pressure and the fluidic system for the sperm to travel down the tube and meet with the ovum as part of the fertilization system and formation of new seed. So revision of quark charge calculations really lets you see the world in a different way. You have a 16 part system for helium rather than 14, and those 2 extra parts really allow you to go, so there's a way that you can then see the 75-25% rule, the 3-to-1 type ratio in the quarks and the electron in the proton model, and the quarks in the positron in the neutron-positron framework, which is the antimatter side of things. And when you start looking at the up quark being negative and the down quark being positive, 2 negatives multiplied together to make a positive, the 2.2 times 2.2 equals 4.48, and we have the charm quark electric field decay 1e to the -6 corresponding, reducing the e to the 12 and the 2 up quark multiplication system. And in this way, yeah, the recent findings where the charm quark is linked to the proton, we can see that, yeah, that mathematics makes perfect sense in the supersymmetry inversion and the revision of quark charge calculations. So really, antimatter is present within atomic structure, and having a revision of quark charge calculations allows you to look at things a little bit differently. And, this is what I've had to do in order to understand the experience that I had, which really was quite, well, it was an out-of-body experience, and it was something that couldn't really be reconciled with in terms of the ideas of an external physical reality. Obviously, it took place within me. It took place within the aromatic ring system of dopamine, and it released this 156.72 Hafnium. It was an alpha particle experience, 23 milliseconds, giving rise to a vision of future events in my life. So we have this prophetic information storage system linked to memory formation, memory recall, and biology associated with the half-life timings of unstable atoms. So we build unstable atoms in our biology linked to memory. And that process is not well described, but finding a relationship to the ideas of the Passion story, the Passion of Christ, in terms of atomic cross and the processes of cross-based symmetry and the reciprocal system, the n equals 3 layer of the proton and the Passion line, and the amine NH3 plus. I was able to kind of connect the story of the Passion of Christ with the biological pathway connected to proton tunneling and forming memory formation and memory recall. You might think that's a little bit strange that a scientist is looking at spiritual information. Well, when you have an experience that you can't explain using rational science based on measurement, then you go looking elsewhere to see if you can find any connections to the experience that you've had. And so I've had to kind of build a model. In this hafnium atom, there's 84 neutrons, and that took me to 43 years from the year 2013 up to 2056. And in 2056, I will be 84 years of age. So, I was born in 1972. I saw this experience in 2013, a 43-year kind of download, and take me to the year 2056. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, so this makes sense mathematically in terms of the energetics of the aromatic ring and how the radius of the aromatic ring links to the age of the universe. So these are our atomic clock interfaces for the energetics of healing and regeneration within biology. And it kind of, then you go, oh, so, we're all tuned atomic clockwise. Our biology works using an atomic clock system, and maybe we're not so kind of reductionist, materialistic, physical being after all. We're really a time-traveling atomic clock system that records memory for healing and regeneration. And in a Bose Einstein condensate, which is kind of what forms in the aromatic ring through proton tunneling into the ring, the individuality of atoms loses their kind of identity, right? When a Bose-Einstein condensate is formed on cooling in a laboratory, you can take a number of atoms and then produce essentially a coherent wavelength at its ground state, and that corresponds to a single atom state, a single wavelength at the ground state. And that's a homogeneous singularity kind of form that's large, not small, not one-dimensional, but three-dimensional, and it can have functionality associated with those structures where you can have a one wavelength state, a ground state energy, you can have a radius of a particular size, and therefore you can have a three-dimensional structure where the functionality of the Bose Einstein condensate gives rise to a more complex and dynamic system containing dark energy, dark matter, and the decay processes leading to the formation of matter over time. And so I've been modeling, excuse me, ideas of superfluidity on the basis of room temperature singularities that I can make in the laboratory. And the ideas of no mass and no charge and no space and no time and the viscosity of a fluid, a hydrophobic nature of bosons, the light-based system and the electromagnetic field within an atom, having no mass and no charge, and the gluon field within the quark system and the nucleus. Again, the ideas, well, photonic systems have no mass and no charge, but it's an energetic system, obviously. The higher the energy, the more mass in a way. You can convert energy to mass, but they are interconvertible. And really biology is able to convert light to structure. If you think of plants and their photosynthetic process leading to the formation of the tree. And in a biological system, we have an electromagnetic system within the hydrogen atom that correspondingly is enabling the transformation of light into atomic form. And there's a house in which this process takes place, and that house is the aromatic ring system. And proton tunneling into the ring, it's a Faraday cage, it's hidden from view and you can't see it, but it makes atomic clocks. And that's really the functionality of the unstable atom system, giving rise to the energy required in biology to make stuff atomically to give rise to structure. So if we go back to the idea of a Helium Bose Einstein condensate singularity at the beginning of time, we can really start to model that and get some ideas of how something can be big, three-dimensional, but still not able to be measured because it's at the ground state and only has one wavelength. And the triple point of helium, at a very low temperature, the functionality that provides, well, it's actually below the current cosmic microwave background of 2.73 K. So, we no longer have a Helium Bose Einstein condensate. We have a system that is generating an energetic field of cosmic microwaves that have been produced via a process that has led to the composition of the universe that we have today. And my postulate with the inclusion of positrons, the 16 particle helium atom model, and the alpha particle system giving a 12 and 4 frame of reference where the alpha particle has no charge because the neutron's negatively charged and the proton's positively charged. What we have is a way of modeling that with the n equals 4 layer, the bracket line electron transition corresponding to a 16 component Lyman line relationship. And what we see when we look at the kind of bracket line in Planck lengths at 9.12 e to the plus 28, and we look at the Lyman line in terms of meters, where we've got 9.12 e to the negative 8 meters, the delta there is 1 e to the negative 36 or 1 e to the plus 36. And if you think about that in terms of the inflationary process of 1 e to the negative 36 of a second, here's the imprint on our biology linked to differential velocities connected to the process of the bracket line. So our biology has come from cosmology and it's come from the subatomic processes. And when you start to model the hydrogen atom and the electromagnetic dynamic system that's operating there, you can see that imprint. You can see the relationship. And the wavelength of the Bose Einstein condensate, at least in the He-BEC model, it's 4e to the negative 14 of a meter, and the reciprocal system 2.5e to the plus 13 meters to the power of negative 1. And when you multiply the reciprocals together, you get 1. So you can kind of have a framework that links back to the ideas of the multiplication of 1, giving 1, provides a unification approach, which, as a biologist, I'm not into complex theories. I want a simple theory that allows me to understand how hydrogen is the building block and how that is critical to creating a living system. And if you don't include proton tunneling in that, then you're missing the dynamic process linked to 1e to the 27 Planck lengths, essentially the place where the electron is in hydrogen at 5.7e to the plus 27 Planck lengths, again, is connected to the cosmic inflationary process of 1e to the plus 27 meters. It's an imprint, right? We've been born out of the atomic universe, but the atomic universe is an imprint of the cosmological process that's led to the generation of the universe from its initial state. And that's what this model is showing. It's showing that helium, He-42, He-BEC singularity, and isotropic fluid, the superfluid of helium, is really the starting point. And it's a low energy nuclear system. It's cold, and it's an alpha particle process, giving rise to the composition of the universe that we have today. And, this is a big singularity. The radius corresponding to c, the speed of light, and the composition, really, it provides context, right? Composition provided by 1e to the 18 seconds as the half-life, as you could say, as the crow flies, right, in a straight line. The half-life timing systems connected to the 1e to the plus 27 and the 1e to the negative 36. And I'll leave you to do the calculations on that. It's pretty simple. It's 1 over, it's an inverse square law in terms of timing. And the square root times time system giving rise to the meter distance. So, previously people have looked at the ideas of a primeval atom system, a cosmology related to that in terms of Lemaitre. Dirac was connecting these kind of ideas in his large number hypothesis as well. So this is, you could say it's nothing new. So what's new is really identifying the functionality of alpha particle emission with the inclusion of the positron, giving rise to the initial state as a Bose-Einstein condensate of helium. And it's what its radius is and what its internal wavelength is and the alpha particle half-life timing. All those kind of defined parameters correlate to process that gives rise to composition of the universe. And when you look at the alpha particle decay system, the standard model suggests that alpha particles have a charge of +2 because they don't see a proton and a neutron as opposite charges. They see the neutron as a matter form, whereas in the supersymmetry inversion model, revision of quark charge calculations, what we're seeing really is a way of understanding the ideas that the neutron is the antimatter side of things. And alpha particle decay half-life timings, range from e to the negative 6 of a second to e to the 17 seconds. What I'm saying is when I have a 1e to the 18 second model compared to the age of the universe, what we get is a 7.26% decay of alpha particles, which is, you take it from 75, 25, the initial dark energy, dark matter at T0, And then what you get is a 7.26% decay. You end up with 67.74% dark energy. So it's a beautiful process, right? A beautiful process that gives rise to functionality that we see in the subatomic processes of biology. And when you use half-life calculators, you can explore the number of particles based on that initial wavelength, internal structure plus the radius based on the speed of light, and really, start to evaluate the functionality based on the half-life timings and explore the percentage remaining of dark energy over time. And really, it's just a matter of playing with the numbers in order to give you a bit of an insight as to dark energy, dark matter, charge quark systems that are formed based on differential velocity, giving pi particles correlated to the formation of mass and charge through asymmetry. And, the initial Lorentz asymmetry breaking dark energy, dark matter through alpha particle emission is critical to giving the flavor of the proton and the neutron and the positron and the electron. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful way of looking at the He-BEC model as the initial state, and then at T0 alpha particle emission geometry, giving 25% dark matter and then 75% dark energy, and then a decay system giving the composition of the universe, where your dark matter is an implosive system, and the dark energy is a cosmological inflation system. And we've got a process of decay that then generates protons, neutrons, electrons, and positrons. And when you look at the neutron as the antimatter part and the decay of dark energy into helium-3 which is, I've got 2 protons, 2 electrons, 1 neutron, and 1 positron, the helium-3 is a third antimatter. And the dark matter side of things decaying into a positron and a neutron, it's an antimatter side of things. And that antimatter then decays into a hydrogen 1,1, which is a proton electron based on the half-life timings of the positron and the neutron. And so that kind of system operates through baryonic symmetry to begin with, without any charges associated with dark energy and dark matter. And it's a more hydrophobic fluid system. And what we see really is a way that the decay timings correspond to composition. So that initial state is a Bose Einstein condensate giving rise to the composition of the universe. You can only get there when you look at the inclusion of positrons in atomic theory, and you can only do that if you revise quark charge calculations. And so you kind of have to solve the problem with the missing antimatter in cosmology to begin with, and finding that in a biological system linked to healing and regeneration, the hidden antimatter is within the aromatic ring and the biological system, which is a little bit more close to home than trying to look for it in outer space or subatomically. Okay, so when we do the numbers, we can really see that we've got a 7.26% decay. We've got a process that gives 67.74% dark energy at the moment. After the age of the universe, we get 4.84% matter formation. And we've also got the antimatter side of things, which I've included into the dark matter, because dark matter decays into antimatter and positron, neutron, and then into proton, electron. And that annihilation between matter, antimatter, giving rise to the functionality of light. And so, yeah, there's a little bit more refinement of the model that you can do in terms of the Hubble constant expansion, and we can get into that. But what this kind of frame of reference provides is a way to look at something without actually requiring the need to do any measurements. It's a mathematical language based on isotope physics, half-life timings, and that's what kind of matches atomic theory with the inclusion of positrons with cosmological composition. And we can see in here that the percentage of dark energy changes over time. Now, I've not included the Hubble constant, and there is a system atomically that leads to alpha particle emission in the atomic processes, and that's contributing to the continued accelerated expansion of the universe, at least in this theory, right? And when we see the velocity features, we can see the Hubble process as well within the model. But as a first snapshot, there's a beautiful alignment into the composition and the process of dark energy change over time. But this is not taking into account the atomic systems that then arise from that decay that then can generate further alpha particle emission and the additional expansion process associated with the Hubble constant. So we've gone from a tiny singularity idea to a big singularity, and it's more of an ice cream cone kind of concept where the dark matter implosive traveling from that initial wavelength of 4e to the negative 14 meter down to Planck 1.6e to the negative 35 of a meter, and the outward cosmological inflation expansion going from the idea of 4e to the negative 14 meter, and we're now at 1.6e to the negative 3 of a meter. And this kind of functionality of cosmic inflation and cosmic compression, we've got a system that's operating in harmony, in a synchronicity that maintains conservation rules, that's outside and inside of the matter system. If you look at it as a fractal of each proton having both dark energy, dark matter, and matter componentry, then you can kind of look at the entire system and its reflection and imprinting onto the individual atom. And that's kind of the model that I've been utilizing in the supersymmetry inversion. You look at each individual atom as a reflection of the entire system. And in doing so, you really get a beautiful relationship between the two, and you can see that in the cosmic inflation processes that I kind of outlined associated with the proton. And that's the modeling that I've been conducting. So the He-BEC cosmic velocity of inflation is related to the initial delta wavelength, 4e to the negative 14 meters, correlates to a kilojoule per mole meter per second framework for dark energy, inflation of 29907 with 5 noughts, a meter per second system, right? And it's conservation of energy through the reciprocal implosive process with dark matter at a velocity of 54,687.2929 kilojoule per mole. Now, the kilojoule per mole system is a biological system of bond energy. So really, it's about the space and timing of events. And, obviously the half-life timing process is very much a time side of biology. The beautiful relationship to the proton and pH regulation and control in biology with the He-BEC model is, there are 14 orders of magnitude associated with pH and the 14 orders of magnitude associated with the e to the negative 14, right? So we've got a system where we can go, oh, biology and pH, oh, the He-BEC model, and correlate between the two. And it's a way of going, oh, so here's a cosmological frame of reference that we can use to explore quantum tunneling of protons. So it's really about getting to how the proton works. How do we model the proton? How do we model the proton in a way to create biological living systems, but model cosmologically and subatomically? And the unification of subatomic and cosmological is critical in understanding quantum gravity, and the kilojoule per mole system allows me to do that, right? So having had a weird and wonderful experience, kilojoule per mole is a useful biological tool to explore unification of big and small. And we've got this energy conservation process where the square root of V divided by V equals 1 over the square root of V. So it's a time space, and the aromatic ring time space is really the functionality of the atomic clock side of things. And that's really the exciting new domain, using isotope atomic clock timings for learning the rules of memory formation and memory recall, a biological system that obviously mediates all of the ideas. And it's really a system that we've got to navigate in order to then perceive reality, right? It's part of our very functionality as the observer, making the observation taking place within the mind through the collapse of the wave function, which is actually the isotope half-life timing within the aromatic ring. So there's a biological process, and it's got a metronome. And we can talk a little bit about the metronome within the aromatic ring in terms of the 1 second timing linked to the nanometer per second. And when you look at that, what you see is 3.17 e to the negative 19 coulombs, or a 2 times elementary charge positron-electron timing system mediated through the tau on the muon and the electron timings, which is connected to fight, flight, freeze in biology. So our biology is very much part of the experience of vision, and very much part of our own comprehension of ourselves and the reality that we're creating within ourselves in terms of the measurements that we're making and our comprehension and understanding of reality. So the divided by in this model correlates to 90 degrees, so it's really aligned to s orbital structure in a planar geometry of the aromatic ring system. And the functionality of reciprocals, the 1 over, inverse square law type modeling of Newtonian within this frame of the aromatic ring. We get the reciprocal of Planck, 6.25 e to the 34 meters to the negative 1. And that process is linked to the half-life timings of isotopes and the age of the universe. E to the 17 squared is e to the 34. There's a delta there, yeah. And that's related to the V system rather than the C system. And we're really able to see beyond Planck and see how the isotope timing processes are functioning in biological systems mediated through proton communication. So proton communication in biology is critical when you think the proton is really the zipper in the DNA double helix structure, and that functionality of proton storage in the aromatic ring in the half-life timing system connects to expression timings. And I'm not going to go into too much of that detail in this presentation, but just to say that biology is not carbon-based. Biology is proton-based, and the functionality of proton mediated through Planck time is critical to understand why the proton has the half-life timing that it does, right? And we've really got to start to think about things through the ideas of proton tunneling, not the ideas of a physical reality, because the proton has some beautiful attributes linked to its quantum flavor. Okay, so here's what the system kind of looks like, an outward, and really it's a v squared and a v to the power of 4 and a square root of v to the power of 8. You can look at it in different ways. depending on what you want to see, right? But to maintain conservation of energy, you have to look at it using energetic out as equal and opposite to energetic in, and a compression system linked to dark matter associated with Planck formation over the age of the universe. And we can see that in this model. We can see its functionality linked to the features of matter, antimatter, symmetry, the features of composition, and the changes in composition over time due to the decay processes. So we start with a 75-25 split. And if you think about the dark energy being 75 decaying into a helium-3 and the dark matter as a system that leads to the antimatter neutron positron, and then that decays into a proton electron, you would say, based on our composition of the universe that we know, based on matter, where there's 75% hydrogen and 25% helium, this is the opposite, right? This is an opposite system. So it's really every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? So it's showing the 95% is actually the inverse or the opposite of what we can see. And that's the weird and wonderful aspect of the model, is it really shows the functionality of balance operating in the singularity. And it has a beautiful language that it uses to mediate transformation, but maintaining energy conservation. And when you look at the alpha particle emission process, 180, 18 seconds, based on that, we can see what these decay processes are leading to and how stable and unstable atoms are formed and opposite charges are attractive to one another. Remember, we've got processes that need to go on in order to form a particle out of dark energy and dark matter, and there are steps that take place that lead to that functionality. And I've identified some of these. But the process is consistent with a deeper comprehension of how biology works, right? So the features of our own biology and the hydroxy radical system and its connectivity to breaking open the aromatic ring and releasing this higher energy state of the unstable atom that's built inside that ring as part of memory formation and memory recall produces quantum coherent states and living systems. And that essentially is stitching the fabric of biological reality into physical form through quantum coherent entangled communication. And our biology is not, it's an atomic system. Yeah, we see a stable atom atomic system is easy to measure. And the unstable atomic system hidden away in the Faraday cage of the aromatic ring can't be measured. So we're stuck not measuring something that we can't measure because it's hidden from us. And building a model that allows us to model it is the only thing that I know how to do in order to kind of peer down the rabbit hole of unstable atoms and connect that to the functionality of the atomic clock systems operating in human biology. And the revision of quark charge calculations then allows you to build a framework to see how symmetry can operate. Supersymmetry and inversion is this model. And the inverted reciprocal system, where every action is having an equal opposite reaction, is the transformation taking place. So you don't get to see it because it's actually involved in doing the transformation. And it's no longer there, but you then get to see the asymmetry generated in the output. And so we've really got a model that's showing us the last part, and we don't have a model showing us the first part. And I'm trying to build a model showing us the first part based on isotope decay, alpha particle emission, and revision quark charge calculations. And this way we get some insight into that functionality of what happened, what the initial structure was, and how that initial structure provides context to the composition of the universe that we have today. So really important to look at things in multiple ways, not just one way. look at multiplying the quark charge calculations, look at adding them together, look at what that means in terms of overall charge in the nucleus versus in the orbital layers. There's a boundary between positron and electrons, what that boundary is made of, how that changes over time, how it changes depending on whereabouts in the hydrogen atom it is. So there's a lot of functionality that we don't get to see, but we can only model. And by modeling the system in a different way, we get to see different functionality. So it's not about doing it just one way, it's about looking at it in different ways, and then that allows you to explore subatomic processes operating within the atom. And so I've been modeling this and looking at different ways of how to kind of comprehend what tunneling and entanglement lead to. Because if we start with something that doesn't have any mass and doesn't have any charge, and really it's a cosmic inflation system and a cosmic compression system, there's no matter yet, then no matter what you kind of do, you can't use the ideas of matter. So you've got to convert all the matter-based system, which is standard model, and you've got to convert it back into a photonic-based no mass, no charge framework. So you're kind of working backwards from what we've got. And the measurement systems that we've got have been kind of high energy physics. And how do you convert that then into a low energy system to explore functionality? And a lot of it is about looking at things in different ways. The up quark being negatively charged, down quark being positive, is upside down, right? It's back to front. If you think positive is up and negative is down, well, you think about if positive is up and that environment's positive, then things that are negative are going to be attracted to it. So your quark that's in the up position is going to be attracted to the field energy that's negative, and vice versa, right? So they're going to try to neutralize the environment that they're in. And when they're neutralizing the environment, they go to the opposite charge. And that way the environment is able to select for an outcome that neutralizes it and gives rise to a state that's no longer got any charge. And then if it's got no longer any charge, it would be in a way in a more natural state corresponding to what the initial state was, where there was no charge. So it's kind of come from that point of view, and you can kind of take it back to that point of view when you look at it in a slightly different way. And really, this is about finding a way to neutralize the charges in order to get a zero state so that you can see the neutrality within the particle system associated with the neutrality within the kind of field system. And when you do that, you then get to kind of view things in a slightly different way, which then starts to make sense in terms of, so then tunneling and entanglement can allow you to generate functionality that has both mass and charge because it's created an asymmetry. And the asymmetry that we had initially with dark energy, dark matter, cosmic inflation and cosmic compression gives rise to the initial kind of asymmetry that you then see in the proton. And that's really driven through the tunneling systems. So here we've got a way of kind of going, so there's something that predates atom formation and there's initial structure that's there, and that structure then gives rise to this functionality that we see in the proton, and that 1836 feature, the 18, 1e to the 18 second, and the 36 is the feature associated with the 1e to the negative 36 linking to the cosmic inflation process. So you can kind of it helps you remember what the steps are, and it provides a tool to explore temporal features that may imprint later stages of the functional development of the universe. And when you're looking at time and you're looking at velocity, obviously differential velocity creates a tension. And if you've got one thing moving faster than the other and it's getting further away, that tension that's being created is causing an expansion. And we have this Hubble constant functionality with the continued expansion of the universe. And the system seems to account for the Hubble constant on the basis of differential velocity between V and C, right? So where V is the initial state, it's slowing down over time, leading to the formation of C, the speed of light, but you've got an expansion of space giving rise to the delta. And that forms particles in the process. So it's really a initial state radius corresponding to C, and the universe is kind of referring back to that frame of reference, going, am I related to C? Am I bigger or smaller? And if I'm faster, then I need to expand. If I'm slower, I need to contract, right? So the contraction of space and the expansion of space has to be operating in a way that makes consistent sense in terms of the Hubble constant. And when you look at the system, we can see that there are features associated with the He-BEC model that's really, really interesting. You know, the square root V plus the square root, or multiplied the square root C, you end up with 72,001. And you know, the Hubble tension between 67 thousand and 74,000. So the He-BEC model prediction based on this kind of modeling gives rise to a number that's kind of in the middle between those two numbers. So we've got a compression system linked to dark matter, linked to gravitational processes, linked to the actual numbers. And, you know, looking at the features of our biology, linking Planck energy states to the atomic timing systems of the clocks operating in a biological system is very different from the standard approach of looking at biology based on measurement, based on DNA, based on protein, RNA, etc. So we're really looking at very, very different functionality, a time-based functionality in biology, not the structure function based on a molecular process. So if you're not familiar with the processes of differential velocity, then, you know, this kind of model is not going to make much sense to you. But what this is doing is really showing that there's an inversion occurring. The strong force and the gravitational force are actually one and the same. And because they are at either ends of the reciprocal system, the smallest thing becomes the largest becomes the smallest. And that way you can see the linkage between the strong force within the gluons linked to the gravitational force. So this, does provide a unification of the gravitational force and the strong force, and it provides context for proton tunneling and the amine dopamine, the NH3 plus, N equals 3 layer, and where 3 squared is 9, and 3 to the power 4, part of the magnetic system is 81, 9.81 meters per second squared is the gravitational process that's imprinted on our biology in terms of the dopamine amine. And when you further explore the dopamine amine and its role as a proton tunneling system into the aromatic ring, really this is what you can look at that in terms of its pKa at 8.93, which corresponds to 1.64 e to the negative 22 seconds in the modeling that I've done. And that's showing a functionality linked to the Higgs boson. And out of the Planck field energy system, we've got a link as well to the charm quark timing of 80 to the negative 27 of a second, and the second part of the charm timing is 125, which is linked to the Higgs boson mechanism. So in the ring is where the action's happening, and because it's a Faraday cage, it's hiding everything from us. And you need a mathematical frame of reference in order to build a model that then shows you what's going on beyond the veil of isotope timing energy. And it's not easy, it's not simple, it's not something that can be done overnight, and it takes a lot of time and effort and energy to build a functional model based on the initial velocity, based on the He-BEC singularity and the initial wavelength. So the square root V and 1 over alpha fine structure constant, and that functionality of the implosion and the generation of four particles, where your mu naught is the permittivity and the permeability of space, the magnetic system and the aromatic ring. And really it provides a context for the gravitational system as a differential energetic velocity leading to particle formation. And this is what the model's showing. It's connected directly to how our biology works to convert the light energies around us into our physical form. And that's a really, really weird thing to say, that we're growing atoms within ourselves using hydrogen and proton tunneling, storing them in the aromatic ring to grow the energy for the future of our body. And biology, like I said, is hiding the antimatter, and it's the antimatter-matter asymmetry in the aromatic ring system that is why it's hidden from cosmology. And the technology that I developed back in 2013 and the experience that I had showed me this. So when the hydroxylation of the aromatic ring occurs and eventually you break open the aromatic ring, you get to visually see the atom that you have housed inside it. And that's where the physics of life come in. The atomic force, the life force energy housed in the ring that you grow through proton tunneling. And the metronome of nanometers per second of 3.17 e to the negative 19 coulombs. It's a beautiful thing, right? That it's a beautiful thing that the timing of 1 second producing positron-electron pairing is linked to the isotope. So we're all tuned up as long as we're connected to the vacuum of space through the Planck energetics. And when you look at the Planck energetics in kilojoule per mole, based on that distance, you get 7.4767 e to the plus 30 kilojoules per mole. And when you divide that by the n equals 1 position of the electron in the hydrogen atom at 5.7 e to the plus 27, you get a remainder of 1311.7 kilojoules per mole, which is essentially the ionization energy or angular momentum associated with the electron. So the system that we have operating with us is perfect. And we need to understand biology at that level so that we can comprehend the energetics within our environment impact people's health and well-being. So it's best to utilize a technology that's going to be beneficial rather than detrimental. And we can see, through the modeling, we can look at the kilojoule per mole versus nanometer and get kind of slopes associated with the gravitational system and the subatomics. And using inverse square law, we get numbers correlated to different locations within the atom, giving rise to its gravitational energy. And there are frequency wavelength energy converters that you can use to explore distance at subatomic processes and their relationship to different velocities. And this is what I've been doing. I've been kind of modeling the hydrogen atom utilizing this kind of functionality in order to make sense of proton tunneling. And when you get to see the He-BEC system, the 4e to the negative 14 meters down to the Planck 1.6e to the negative 35, you can understand the deltas, right? You can see where the charms related to the electric and magnetic decay properties from the Planck field. Can look at the implosive process and the delta between 4e to the negative 14 and 1.6e to the negative 35, 4e to the negative 22 of a meter, and its relationship in order to understand the timings. And really, it's about building a frame of reference, right? This is what it is. It's a framework to allow exploration of functionality that's operating biologically that we cannot measure. We can't measure Planck time, yet the Planck time and its reciprocal corresponds to the reciprocal of the half-life of the proton. And so what it's really saying is that the proton is the key gateway atom for the biological system to understand the atomic clock timings and the way that genes are expressed, when they're expressed, and why the structure of the chromosome is the way it is, and how it's evolved over time. So it's a beautiful, beautiful model that's deep into Planck process. And the Planck process is really mediated through the universe and how the universe works. And we can see an evolutionary tree, a family of atomic structures being formed over time, leading to cosmological composition from dark energy, dark matter. It's a genealogy, right? We have a genealogy. We're all linked back to the He-BEC singularity, at least in this model. It's just like saying, oh, I was that one cell in my mum, and that one cell became two, that two became 4, then 8, and 16, 32, 64, 128, etc. Right? There's a division that takes place, the initial division in the He-BEC through dark energy, dark matter, giving rise to the composition of the universe and the atomic structures that we have. And you can explore that, and you can look at it from the perspective of not the particles, but the forces. Using the 4 forces as the fundamental bridge to unify all atomics is useful, but you need to include the relationship between the strong force and gravity, right? We need to understand that functionality through the reciprocal system. And when you do that, you get to really explore why we have the features in the atomic systems that we do, why we have the 1e to the 24 difference in energy between the weak force and the gravity. And this model shows that that's related to the charm quark process and the asymmetry created through the tunneling system connected to the Higgs, giving rise to the functionality of mass and charge and the process of the W boson, the weak force, right? Linked to the strong force, linked to the gravitational Higgs boson mechanism on the amine. So it really comes back to, you best look at your biology and understand your biology, because the imprints of the universe are within you, mediated through the temporal side of things, connected to the functionality of isotopes housed in the aromatic ring. And when you kind of build your model, you want to be using an exploratory approach. Here we see the cube system of V, which is the alpha particle emission velocity, and the cubed C, their square roots divided by the 6.25 e to the 25, which is a conversion of Planck distance to nanometer. And what that relates to is the 1 over Planck reciprocal multiplied by the half-life timing of the hydroxy radical, which is mediating the ring opening system, which is connected back to the alpha particle half-life timing through inverse square law. So we get to identify 13.58 nanometers, and there's this beautiful kind of reciprocal dance relationship between nanometer and electron volt, where 13.58 nanometers is 91.2 electron volts, and 13.58 electron volts is 91.2 nanometers. So this kind of crazy inverted model provides context for looking at the tunneling systems corresponding to particular locations geometrically and understanding the energetics associated with that. And, the subatomic geometry, cosmological process, proton tunneling, they integrate, they dovetail beautifully within one another. We can see the differential velocities and the different wavelengths and the importance of that in terms of building the next subatomic system that then comes back out and is part of the division of atomic structure, leading to, in a sense, the single atom becoming two atoms. And if you think about the cell division where the mother cell is converted into two daughter cells, that's coming from a subatomic process. And the energetics of that subatomic process predate the process linked to the cell division. And it's really important to understand the atomic systems, the subatomic systems that give rise to that, and the reason for that. And really, these kind of processes predate the complexity of a biological organism, right? So we're really talking about the living features of the atomic systems that give rise to the living features of biological systems. It's not about the stable atom system. That does not compute in terms of giving us the functionality that's operating within us. So we can see the kind of beautiful energetics of Planck vacuum energy related to biology associated with the positioning of the electron and the hydrogen within the aromatic ring at 91.2 nanometers and the metronome timing of 1 second, 2 times the elementary charge. All of those functionalities being built. The reason why every electron is the same size is because of the functionality the aromatic ring has with the vacuum space and to create the process of a proton and a neutron and a positron and an electron. So we have this cosmological biological system operating within us. And it's only when you learn that process that you can comprehend the inner pathway, proton tunneling, storage of energy, and the regenerative processes that biology uses for healing and regeneration at nighttime when we sleep. So the supersymmetry inversion model, Sussy inversion, it's not the same as supersymmetry. It has a wormhole connection through the aromatic ring down to the singularity Planck system, and the compression of hydrogen in the aromatic ring through the proton tunneling connected to our neurotransmitter functionality is leading to the formation of tornado wormholes to connect to the vacuum of space. So we have this beautiful system working within us when we are functionally able to proton tunnel. If we're not got our proton tunneling working properly within our biology, then we have a problem health-wise. And what this shows is hydrogen-mediated functionality within biology is critical to health and well-being. Proton tunneling, building these atomic clock systems that occurs naturally within the aromatic ring and then breaking the ring open using the hydroxy radical oxidative system, releasing the millions of electron volts to scatter the electrons and positrons and enable quantum coherent entanglement to take place in biology giving rise to the coherent state of a living system, that is so important for health and well-being, because that really is the quantum communication system to make a biological system work in harmony. It's unified. You know the difference between yourself and a foreign material because it's actually been united into your biology through quantum entanglement via the isotope atomic clock system. And if you don't have that operating, then you're going to get disease in your body. And so building an understanding of proton tunneling and the geometry of atomic structure within the aromatic ring based on a supersymmetry inversion model, the idea that the aromatic ring with its delocalized electron system acts as a Faraday cage. It's a diamagnetic process, and it excludes the gluon quark system that's magnetic, and it allows diamagnetic hydrogen to enter. We've got a system that is different from the surrounding water polar system, right? We've got a system that can store light energy on the aromatic ring, essentially like the event horizon of a black hole singularity. And you really got to understand the supersymmetry inversion reciprocal calculations that allow you to see that. And it's not the standard physics of electromagnetism. It's not the standard physics of quantum mechanics. It's a supersymmetry inversion singularity mathematics that's related to inverse square law because of the energy conservation rules. And it's that system that I'm using to explore proton tunneling into the ring. And really, this is kind of where the model is at, right? This is showing us features of the aromatic ring, the building of a quantum coherent superfluid based on compressed hydrogen, the linking the radius to the age of the universe, the temporal features of the photon passion line tunneling system, the relationship between the radius of the aromatic ring and the features of the n=1 position correspond to the red photon in the Balmer line. The second timing metronome 2 times elementary charge system, the 720-degree rotation fermion process. This model really integrates the features of dopamine and its functionality as a proton tunneling machine at the pKa of 8.93, corresponding to that Higgs boson mechanism and the mechanism connected to gravity, right? This is our gravitational system within our biology, building the atomic forms into our very being, right? So biology is beautiful. Biology predates anything associated with the ideas of concepts of materialism. So yeah, consciousness comes first. This is the inner eye of the aromatic ring, and the aromatic ring was present at the beginning of time in terms of Maxwell's idea of the Bose Einstein superfluid and its supersolid state in terms of its structure as the ideal fluid. And we need to understand the features of our biology, and we have to mediate our bias in making measurements, knowing that we have this within us, and this is operating through 3 timings associated with the tau, the muon, and the electron. And if we're unaware of that, and we're making measurements, and our measurements are mediated through observation, and the observer effect taking place is essentially connected to the role of the isotopes that are inside of your aromatic rings when you're making measurements. And the best way that I've come to understand the system is to not interact with it. It's like you have to stop trying to force it to do what you want and actually accept what it gives you when it gives you it, because the proton information, and which is the coded energetics of your biology, is mediating its connection to the very foundations of the vacuum energy that surrounds you. And that tunneling metronome 1 second timing controlling your isotope decay processes, leading to the visual information that you have. So you're building up these energetic systems on the aromatic ring. You're building a quantum coherent superfluid from the proton tunneling, and you're connecting energetically out of the vacuum of space. So we're really having to revise our knowledge and understanding of how biology is operating. It's not just the DNA, it's not just a RNA, it's not just a protein. It's not just the complexity of biochemistry in the cell. It's not just the functionality associated with atoms. We have a connection to the vacuum of space. We have a connection to the cosmic microwave background. And you can see that in the antimatter decay timings associated with the positron and the neutron. And it's these systems within the aromatic ring that function within biology as the atomic clock timings, so that everything's tuned to perfection based on the timings that are in the ring and that's sending the energetic information out at the right time. So how do I go about really modeling this, right? How do you model isotope decay energy associated with the space-time process linked to kilojoule per mole, linked to the subatomic, Planck lengths per second or meters per second, if you want to look at it cosmologically? Yeah, you have to get into understanding decay rates, half-life timings, and processes associated with that. And when you look at the work that I did as an enzymologist in my PhD, looking at proteases, isolating them, doing enzyme kinetics, and comparing them, right? Comparative analysis is really what I've been doing. So I've been using, in this new latest work of the proton tunneling system, really looking at isotope half-life timings and its connection to the kinetics of space-time, or time-space in the aromatic ring, and its functionality in terms of the motion of space and time and the kinetic parameters. 1 over V max, negative 1 over Km, and Km over V max is the slope, right? So we've got features that we can then explore subatomically, this kind of delta difference between location and Planck, and we've got the ideas of the half-life timing as a second component. And so we can look at the ideas of velocity in meters per second and timing, and really kind of do an exploratory comparative analysis to explore subatomic processes within the hydrogen atom and the landscape of the subatomic universe. And when you start doing that and you're looking at differential velocities, and you can explore the kilojoule per mole meter per second, and it's reciprocal, second per meter, you get to really align the various particle systems in a chronological order, and you can see relationships. And that's really all it is, right? It's a matter of identification of relationships. And then once you understand the relationship, you can then learn what that means subatomically in terms of energetics. And it's a really fascinating approach because, obviously this is beyond measurement. This is beyond the ability to explore deltas that are hidden away in terms of this energetic process within biological living systems. And so what we do is you make the assumption that there is a positron. It's hidden from you, and you can't see it because it's on the outside of a magnetic field. And then you position that at the same place of where the electron is, and you can do differential velocities, and then you can get modeling of that. And when they're at the same place and you have no difference, then there's no change. And it's the delta change that you see that then functions as a way of looking at what does that mean in terms of wavelength nanometers. And when you explore that, you can find beautiful relationships. And you get to see from the Lyman line, you get to see the Balmer line and the Paschen line system and the bracket line system. So you get to explore subatomic systems based on differential velocity. And we can model that using essentially subatomic space kinetics of Lineweaver-Burke plot. And using proton systems, we can explore the relationship within the subatomics. So 1 over the delta kilojoule per mole, so what are the deltas in between these kind of differential velocities? And we can do that, and we can see this kind of Lineweaver-Burke relationship. And when we start to kind of explore what those numbers mean, we can start seeing connections back to the He-BEC model. So the 1 over alpha fine structure constant comes out as the inverse space expansion 1 over km type. And it's like, oh, so alpha fine structure constant, which is part of the electromagnetic system, we can see that, right, as an n equals 1 position as a delta difference between the positron electron pairing on either side of this kind of membrane system. And we've got that based on the kind of delta relationships. And we can also see the square root C, which is the differential compression velocity that's arisen out of the dark matter side of things as well in the hydrogen. So it's confirming the ideas of the model that you're getting, dark matter decaying into an antimatter positron neutron, and then that decays into a hydrogen 1,1. And that hydrogen 1,1 is obviously stable, but you have matter-antimatter annihilation to give light. So we've got ways of generating light through a decay pathway linked to dark matter that's part of compression. And we can see the fourth layer correlated to 17414. And so that's giving us information in terms of the fourth layer and its functionality connected to the process of inward. And when you do this kind of mathematical frame of reference connected to the layering of the hydrogen atom, you see that the fifth layer and above has a very different slope, a different shape, and it's not related to the inward system, it's related to an outward system. And the balance of in and out is really where conservation of energy is taking place. And we can see that from the Planck vacuum field connected to CHARM, and the proton tunneling system and the amine connected to the dopamine Higgs mechanism. So it's really, we have conservation rules applying energetically within biology that we need to understand the reciprocal language that's going on. Both pathways are operating synchronistically. It's not one thing, it's both things, and they operate in a way to conserve energy. So biology is built from that. It's very smart. And it's like you get something for nothing because you do two things at once rather than one thing at a time. So you're not forcing things to happen. You are actually utilizing a conservation of energy process, which operates naturally, cosmologically connected to dark energy and dark matter. And that is really profound because you can then start to understand how biology is working, why anabolic and catabolic pathways are operating simultaneously. Different timings and in different locations, but overall, we've got the system that's so quantumly coherent And the communication, you might be measuring over here, but what you're actually doing is altering something there. And you're unaware of that because of that communication and the tunneling that's occurring and the energetics of that. So the complexity of biology is way beyond the rationale of only looking at the matter. And that's really, really, I guess, a critical take-home message is we need to understand biology through a relationship between cosmology and subatomic processes. We need to unite the two extremes to come to terms with how our biology is working within us and the functionality of insight, the processes connected to the vacuum of space within us, which is part of our intuition. And it is real, and it is valid, and it is scientific, and it is so beautiful, and that you can't see it because it's hidden through this Faraday cage temporal domain. And we can see it when we model it, right? We can see this implosive spiral coming in via phi, the kind of Lucas or the Fibonacci type sequence. 1 over 0.618 is 1.618. And so there's an atomic inflation and an atomic deflation. In a sense, there's this driving system, gravitational implosive process linking proton biology to tunneling, linked to the aromatic ring, the diamagnetic properties. The proton is key to this biology. And we can see the orbital functionality and the rate of inflation and its reciprocal system, right? The electron's traveling based on its diamagnetic features in the proton and its drift velocity, right? Where the magnetic and electric fields are neutralized so that you can eliminate the ideas of mass and charge, and it accelerates by a gravitational system from the Higgs mechanism of the proton tunneling into the aromatic ring. The quarks are stored on its event horizon as the memory system, and this is how biology is storing memory and recalling it through the isotope decay half-life timing to give the healing and regeneration at nighttime when we're sleeping. So our biology is remarkable from many perspectives. And when you see the link to the vacuum energy emission process and how it's been built, right? How the quark mediates this kind of relationship between Higgs boson and the Planck field, how it's at that pivot point between you would say the proton up quark, down quark system, and then you've got your charm in the middle, and you've got your top quark, bottom quark at the other end. So we have a balanced system operating within us. And the muon times the tauon half-life timings, giving 4 times the elementary charge, and there's a reciprocal system that gives the other 4. And so you really need to go, how do we see things that can't be measured? We have to use a mathematical framework. What's the right framework? Well, quantum mechanical probability, statistics based doesn't really help me because I want to have a model that shows me the atom form, its change, its transformation, and its relationship with charge formation. And here we see that surface area correlates to the delta between the charm quark location and Planck. You get 5 e to the plus 8, and you could talk about it as meters per second, or you could talk about it as Planck lengths per second if you wanted to. And how that relates to a surface area property that is 3.14 e to the plus 18, and then that reciprocal correlates to 2 times the elementary charge. And the reciprocal of the quark position at n equal, that kind of 45.8 6 nanometer. That correlates to the reciprocal of Planck. And again, you can, do the mathematics, look at surface area, correspond to 2 times elementary charge. So this kind of dance of reciprocals, inversion, square law, it's a really kind of bizarre mathematics because when you multiply the reciprocals together, you get one again. So it's like you have this wavelength collapse system always giving one, and that functionality is linked to the kind of charge process in supersymmetry inversion, where everything's either -1 if it's up and +1 if it's down in the nucleus, and the positron's +1 in the orbital layer and the electron's -1 in the orbital layer. So in a way, it's like using a different mathematical language. I like to call it singularity physics, because you multiply reciprocals and you get one as part of the inverse square law. And it's really about an energy conservation exploration of functionality before mass and charge are generated, right? You can really look at the processes mathematically that lead to the formation of mass and charge via the asymmetry generated and the Higgs boson mechanism essentially connected to the proton tunneling from the amine and dopamine. And why is this important? Why, as a biologist, as an enzymologist, have I got into quantum biology? Why have I dug myself a hole in terms of the aromatic ring and putting energy into it and storing that energy to help people heal and regenerate their bodies? Um, well, it's like saying that, when you're given lemons, you make lemonade. Well, I had an experience that showed me that I break the ring open and I heal and regenerate. And rather than just keeping that to myself, I would rather help other people. That's kind of been my work, right? Over 18 years at New Zealand Research Organisation, developing regenerative medicine technologies for companies. As a 3-year-old, I'd collect the organs out of the sheep, as my dad did home kill, and as an adult, helping a company in New Zealand, Aurora Biosurgery, develop an extracellular matrix scaffold from sheep stomach. So as Newton, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. I've kind of developed a deeper insight into regenerative processes of biology by understanding the cosmological and subatomic processes. And that's resulted in this kind of technology that I've developed, O-Behave Empowering Healing, which is an apotherapy technology based on storing protons in the aromatic ring and having them housed and bound to the proteins, the royal jelly proteins, isolated out of Manuka honey. So you could say I've found a technological system that's operating naturally, and the bees have been doing this, and I've figured out the bees are pretty cool, and I'd rather do that as well with what they're doing rather than the ideas of a physical external reality. I've come up with an internal electromagnetic system based on proton tunneling that grows atomic energy within the aromatic ring. And in doing so, I've got a tech that enables people to heal and regenerate their bodies. And it's a beautiful thing to give somebody the power to heal themselves. And that's really what the technology is about. So what I kind of conclude really is that the universe is using the language of atomic clocks to do things. It's a biologically important discovery to understand the positron being present within atomic structure, and that antimatter is generated biologically and stored in the aromatic ring as an atomic clock Faraday cage system. Works independent of observation, right? So you can't really force things in there. You can't chuck an atom in there, a fully formed atom. You've got to let the system operate the way that it does to create the energy that it does that's structurally appropriate for the living system for healing and regeneration. And the hydroxy radical aromatic ring photophenton chemistry process that leads to breaking the ring and releasing the energy is also natural. So you think of apoptosis, pre-programmed cell death, a senolytic system operating in biology where 50 billion cells die every day, and the energy from those cells are kind of redistributed within our biology. So we've got so much energy within us in terms of the atomic systems that functionally we have a beautiful healing technology that restores our biology back to a kind of factory default via the aromatic ring memory system. And once you understand the relationship between the age of the universe and the aromatic ring, it really shows you that we're limiting ourselves to our comprehension of ourselves because of the filter that the aromatic ring provides. So it slows time down based on the fluidity of the proton tunneling system. So we really have a very, very different atomic clock timer operating that is a feature of our biology. And once you understand how time works in biology through this process, then you can kind of go, oh, so time is actually a biological system. It's a biological pathway. It is a biological process. Time is linked to atomic clocks. It's linked to proton tunneling, to the Passion line electromagnetic system associated with the hydrogen atom, connected to the tunneling and growing of atoms, which is all part of the model that I've been developing. So the N over Z, or the New Zealand kind of context of NZ, associated with the number of neutrons and protons, and the model that I built is a little bit weird, but it provides context for a different perspective, inner perspective, not an outer perspective, and a unification perspective where cosmology and subatomic processes are unified in the biological living being, which is making the observations. And in doing so, you come to terms with life, and the inner doors that energetics of different isotopes create within you. And so we have our own biology to be responsible for ourselves and our health and our well-being. Once you understand how the energetics of the living systems operate within you through the proton and its form and function in tunneling, I think you can start to come to terms with the modality of the healing energy technology that I've developed at He-BEC Empowering Healing as part of quantum technologies. So this is really a new way to see the universe, see the subatomic's relationship to the cosmological, connecting the cosmological composition to atomic theory. And yeah, I just like to say thanks for giving me the time and space to develop this knowledge and technology. If you want to get in touch and want to really comprehend the benefits of the product, you best try it for yourself. You can go to my website, ohbehave.co.nz, www.ohbehave.co.nz, or you can reach me on the phone number or the email address. But really, it's a regenerative tech that the bees make, and I've figured out how to kind of work with them rather than trying to force them to do anything. I'm kind of finding ways to occupy my time energetically whilst building atomic energy for healing and regeneration. So I'd like to stop there. Thank you. And yeah, look, I'm going to post this on YouTube. You can like, subscribe, and get new updates on the tech, or go to my various websites. And please, yeah, give it a go. Have a read of the reviews. The science of quantum biology is a non-physical science. It is a supersymmetry inversion model. It's a Newtonian kind of framework to look inside the arithmetic ring to see the time side of things, not just about the structure function, but the temporal functionality of atomic clocks in biology. So again, thank you.